Welcome to the debate. Today we are opening the books on Revelation chapter 9, specifically the fifth trumpet. This is widely considered the most terrifying sequence in the entire New Testament. The opening of the bottomless pit, the darkening of the sun, and the release of a locust army that torments humanity for 5 months.
It is absolutely the stuff of nightmares. You have the sun blotted out by smoke rising like a furnace, the sound of wings sounding like charging chariots, and leading this swarm is a figure that has baffled and terrified scholars for centuries. Revelation 9:11 names him explicitly. They have as king over them the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon.
And the identity of this king is our battleground today. The text presents us with a figure of immense power and, well, terror. The core question is one of identity and agency. Is Apollyon a sovereign demonic entity, a lord of the flies ruling a rival kingdom of darkness? Or, as I'm going to argue, is this figure a personified function of divine judgment, a tool operating under strict heavenly command that will ultimately be discarded?
And I'm taking the countered position, what we might call the entity view. When I read this text, I don't see a function or a metaphor. I see a malevolent agent, a king with a name, leading an army to torture people. To reduce this to a divine tool feels like an attempt to sanitize a text that is explicitly describing, a breakout of hell. It looks like a prison break, not a police action.
I understand that hesitation. It is a gruesome passage, and our instinct is to distance God from the horror of it. But my position, the Apollyon thesis, is that we have fundamentally misread the genre of this chapter. We are reading it as a horror story about a monster escaping containment, when we should be reading it as a courtroom drama about a sentence being executed.
A sentence being executed, that is a very clinical way to describe scorpion stings and people gnawing their tongues in agony. But okay, let's hear your opening argument. Why should we view the King of the Abyss as anything other than a villain?
Well, we have to start by stripping away the medieval mythology we've layered onto the text. When we hear Abaddon, we think of a high-ranking demon with a personality, a backstory, maybe a pitchfork. But if we look at the linguistic evidence, the text is doing something very specific. Revelation 9:11 is a bilingual gloss. John gives us the Hebrew, Abaddon, and the Greek, Apollyon.
Right, which translates to destruction and the destroyer.
Exactly. But look at how the Hebrew Bible uses Abaddon. It appears in Job 26.6, Proverbs 15:11, and Proverbs 27:20. In every single one of those instances, Abaddon is not a person. It is a place. It's a parallel term to Sheol, the grave, or the realm of ruin. Proverbs says, Sheol and Abaddon lie open before the Lord. It's the geography of undoing, not an agent with a personality.
So your argument starts with the idea that John is engaging in personification.
Precisely. The text takes the Hebrew concept of destruction as a place and translates it into the Greek active participle, Apollyon, the destroyer. Revelation isn't introducing a new character to the cast of biblical villains. It is giving a face to the concept of destruction itself. We see this elsewhere in Revelation. Death rides a horse in chapter 6. Hades is thrown into a fire in chapter 20. Here, destruction is personified as a king.
I follow the linguistics, I do. But I think you're leaping from a dictionary definition to a theological conclusion that the text doesn't really support. You're ignoring the plain reading of the action. You can talk about personification all day, but Revelation 9:11 explicitly calls this figure a king, a basileus. Abstract concepts don't wear crowns. They don't marshal troops.
But king can be a functional title regarding authority, can it not? It denotes the one who governs the domain.
It implies agency. It implies a will. And look at the nature of the work. These locusts are described as having tails like scorpions to torment mankind. They seek to harm. This looks like malice. If we call this a divine function, aren't we risking making God the author of monstrosity? I mean, the text reads like a containment breach. The smoke darkens the sun. That is an invasion of chaos. It suggests a force that wants to destroy, rather than a neutral tool that has to.
You're touching on the problem of theodicy, the justice of God in the face of suffering. But if we look at the source of the abyss, your containment breach theory starts to fall apart. Psalm 36.6 says, "Your judgments are like the great deep." The Greek translation there uses the word abysses. The abyss isn't Satan's headquarters, it's the deep reservoir of God's unfathomable justice.
That's poetry. This is narrative. And the narrative describes a nightmare. But okay, let's move into the mechanics of this invasion. You mentioned the source of the abyss, but let's talk about the door. Because to me, the door opening looks like Pandora's box.
The door is the key, pun intended.
Revelation 9:1.1. I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit.
Right, but focus on the passive construction. He was given the key. The abyss cannot open itself. It requires a key, and that key is issued from heaven. If Apollyon were a rival king, a sovereign demon lord, he would have his own key. He wouldn't need permission to exit his own home. The key signifies authorized release. This isn't a prison break where the inmates overpowered the guards. This is a judicial release authorized by the throne.
I have to push back hard on that. The permission argument doesn't resolve the moral problem, nor does it prove Apollyon isn't a demon. I mean, if a warden unlocks a cell and lets a serial killer out into the general population, the warden has authorized the release, sure, but the killer is still a killer. The killer still has his own malevolent will. The fact that God permits the release doesn't mean the entity is God's agent. It just means God is using a monster for a moment.
That is a fair distinction, and a critical one. If the text only showed a door opening, I would agree with you. But the text gives us evidence that this isn't just a permitted monster running wild. Look at the behavior of the swarm. This is what I call the locust pattern argument. If this were chaotic evil, if this were your serial killer let loose, the destruction would be indiscriminate. But these locusts obey 3 incredibly strict commands.
You mean the restrictions in verse 4?
Yes. Command 1, do not harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree. Now stop and think about that. What do locusts do? They eat green things. That is their entire biological imperative. For a demonic horde to ignore the environment entirely suggests a supernatural discipline that reverses their own nature.
Or it suggests they're supernatural entities that don't eat grass. I mean, that's not necessarily discipline, it's just a different diet.
Okay, but look at the next command. Command 2, do not kill them but only torment them for 5 months. And command 3, only harm those who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads.
That is admittedly disciplined for a demon army. I'll grant you that.
It's not just disciplined, it's litigious. It mirrors the plagues of Egypt. It targets specific people based on a covenantal marker, the seal, and avoids nature entirely. A chaotic rebel force, a rival kingdom, would want to destroy God's creation, the grass and God's people, the sealed. Apollyon does neither. That implies he is enforcing God's rules, not breaking them.
I will grant you the grass argument. It's very hard to explain why a demonic horde from the pit of hell would care about deforestation. However, I think you're glossing over the horror of the torment. You call it litigious. I call it sadistic.
Let's dig into that, because the parallel you just acknowledged, the Egypt connection, is where my case for the Apollyon thesis gets its strongest evidence.
You're referencing the Passover, Exodus 12?
Destroyer, Hamashit in Hebrew, passes through Egypt. He passes over the houses with the blood, the seal, and strikes those without. Most biblical scholars agree the destroyer in Exodus was an agent of God, an angel of judgment, not Satan sneaking in to kill the firstborn. My argument is that Revelation 9 is simply the covenantal plague logic of Exodus applied on a cosmic scale. Apollyon is the cosmic Mashit.
It's a compelling structural parallel, I'll give you that. The Passover dynamic of the seal protecting against the invading force is clearly intentional by the author. But here's where the entity view still holds ground for me. The nature of the suffering.
Go on.
In Exodus, the death of the firstborn was swift. Terrible, yes, but swift. In Revelation 9, the text presents a psychological horror.
Men seek death and cannot find it. The torment lasts 5 months. And the text says the torment is like a scorpion sting. Can we really call that a divine attribute? It sounds like torture. You're arguing that God commissions a specific entity to torture people for 5 months without letting them die. That's a heavy theological burden to carry.
It is heavy. I don't want to minimize the severity of it, but we have to ask what the purpose of the torment is. If it were pure malice, like a demon, they would just kill them. The prohibition against killing suggests the goal is something else.
The text says they gnawed their tongues in agony and cursed God. It doesn't look like a rehab program. It looks like sheer vengeance.
I would reframe this through the lens of willing versus unwilling death, which is a concept Paul plays with in Galatians 2:20.
You're going to have to walk me through how Galatians applies to scorpion locusts.
Paul says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live. That is a willing death. The Christian, the one with the seal of God, has already died to themselves. They have embraced the cross. They have already met the consuming fire of God and been transformed by it. They are safe from the locusts, not because they are lucky, but because there is nothing left in them for the destroyer to destroy.
Okay, so the sealed are safe because they are already dead in Christ. That fits the theology.
But the unsealed? They are resisting reality. They're clinging to their false identities, their idolatry, their empire, what the Bible calls the lie. The torment isn't God poking them with a stick for fun. The torment is the friction of finite beings resisting infinite truth.
So you're saying the scorpion sting is what? An existential crisis?
I'm saying it is the pressure of truth against a lie. When you try to hold on to a lie in the presence of absolute truth, it burns. The 5 months is actually a mercy. It is a limited period of intense pressure intended to break their reliance on the lie. It's a siege meant to force a surrender.
That's a fascinating philosophical spin. But look at the text again. They did not repent of the works of their hands. The pressure fails. They don't surrender. They double down.
They do. They harden their hearts, just like Pharaoh. But the point of the judgment is to expose the futility of their rebellion. The fact that they don't die, that they seek death and can't find it, forces them to remain in the presence of the judgment. They cannot escape into non-existence. They have to face the reality of who is king.
It's a terrifying thought. The idea that seeking death is an attempt to escape God, and God won't let you leave. He forces you to sit in the wreckage of your own worldview.
Exactly. It completely flips the script on the Demon King narrative. A Demon King wants to kill you to claim your soul. The Angel of the Abyss wants to break you, in the sense of breaking a fever or breaking a horse. It is the destruction of the will to rebel.
I can see the logic, even if the imagery still feels inherently darker than you are admitting. But let's look at the ultimate fate of this figure. This brings us to the question of ontology, what kind of being this actually is.
The question of the end.
Yes. If Apollyon is just a function, a role, as you say, why does he have a destiny? The text implies judgment upon these forces. You punish persons, not concepts. You don't put a pair of handcuffs on gravity or math. You handcuff a thief. If Apollyon is judged, he must be a person.
That's a common assumption. But let me correct the record regarding the text. Revelation 20:14, what does it say is thrown into the lake of fire?
It says death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire.
Exactly. Death and Hades. Those are abstractions. They are realms, they are conditions, yet they are treated as entities to be consumed.
I suppose that's true. We don't think of Hades as a person, but as a place.
This is the core of the Apollyon thesis. Apollyon is the functional role tied to death. He is the king of the abyss of death. When the scripture says death shall be no more, the role of the destroyer is abolished too. Think of it like the role of an executioner. An executioner is a function of the state. When the law changes or capital punishment is abolished, the role of executioner ceases to exist. Apollyon is a role, not an eternal species.
So you're saying he gets thrown into the lake of fire, not to be punished forever, but to be erased.
Precisely. This connects to the privation of good argument. Evil is parasitic. It has no substance of its own, it's just a distortion of good. The lake of fire isn't a place where demons party forever. It is the consuming fire of God's holiness.
Which burns up anything that isn't real?
Yes, if Apollyon were an eternal demon ruling an eternal hell, dualism would be true. You'd have God's kingdom and Satan's kingdom forever. But since Apollyon and death are consumed, monotheism wins. God becomes all in all, as 1 Corinthians 15:28 says. There is no pocket of eternal resistance.
I have to admit, the idea that evil has no substance is philosophically robust. It solves a lot of theological headaches. But I worry about the pastoral implication. If we reduce Apollyon to a function that just gets burned up, are we taking the reality of evil seriously enough? For the person suffering scorpion stings right now, that evil feels very personal. It feels like an assault.
I would argue we are taking it more seriously. We are saying evil is so antithetical to God that it cannot survive his presence. It must be annihilated. We aren't saying the pain isn't real. We are saying the pain has a termination date.
Let's loop back to the text of Revelation one last time. You mentioned that the abyss is God's judgment depth. But the imagery, smoke darkening the sun, that feels like an obscuring of God, not a revelation of him. When the sun goes dark, hope is lost.
Remember Exodus again. Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. Darkness in the Bible isn't always evil. It's often transcendence. It's the cloud and thick darkness that surrounds the throne. The smoke from the abyss is the terrifying, obscure nature of divine judgment entering the world. It blots out the natural light men rely on, forcing them to reckon with a different kind of light.
That's a difficult pill to swallow. It implies that sometimes God looks like darkness to us.
To the rebel, yes. To the one clinging to the shadows, the light looks like a destroying fire.
You know, I came into this holding pretty tightly to the entity view, the idea that this is a specific, malevolent agent. And while I still think the king language suggests a level of agency, perhaps a fallen angel conscripted into service, I have to admit the force of the Exodus parallel.
The discrimination of the locusts is the key.
It is. Sparing the sealed, sparing the grass, it makes it very hard to argue they are indiscriminate demons. If they were truly chaotic, they wouldn't follow rules of engagement. They would burn the world down.
It changes the genre of the passage. It stops being a horror story about a monster escaping and starts being a solemn account of a court sentence being carried out.
It does. And I acknowledge that viewing Apollyon as a function tied to death solves the dualism problem. If he is a real eternal person who hates God and he exists forever in hell, then evil is eternal. If he is a role that gets dissolved, then God really does win completely, even if the imagery of the stinging locust remains terrifyingly ominous.
It is ominous, and it should be. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but it is the terror of judgment, not the terror of rivalry.
I suppose that is the distinction. One is a scary surgeon, the other is a scary murderer. Both involve knives and pain, but the intent is polar opposite.
That is a perfect analogy. The surgeon's knife hurts, but it cuts out the cancer. The murderer's knife just kills. Apollyon is the knife in the hand of the surgeon.
And as we close, I think that distinction is what makes this text readable. If it's just monsters, it's hopeless. If it's surgery, there is a purpose.
And the ultimate hope is Revelation 21. Death shall be no more. Apollyon is not the hero, but he is a necessary temporary instrument. He is the severe mercy of destruction that clears the way for a reality where God is all in all.
It forces us to reconsider what we mean by destruction. Sometimes the only way to save a building is to demolish the rod. If Apollyon is a demolition crew, then his work, however painful, is part of the renovation.
And when the renovation is done, the demolition crew is no longer needed. The function ceases. The king of the abyss is dethroned by the King of Kings.
A fascinating way to read a text that usually just scares people into silence. There's certainly more to chew on here than just locusts and smoke.
Indeed. We hope this discussion has illuminated the text for you, moving beyond the surface fear to the deeper, sovereign hope found in Revelation.
Thanks for joining the debate.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know, there are certain things in life and in literature that are just designed to trigger this visceral, almost primal reaction.
Oh, yeah.
You see a fin break the water at the beach, you freeze. You hear a rattle in the tall grass, your heart stops. It's pure instinct.
It's the lizard brain kicking in. It just screams, danger, predator, run.
Exactly. And in the landscape of the Bible, specifically, the New Testament, there is one figure that triggers that response more than almost anyone else. We are talking about the ultimate boogeyman, the angel of the abyss.
Revelation chapter 9, verse 11.
A verse so infamous, people actually get nervous just seeing the numbers 9-1 on the page.
We are talking, of course, about Apollyon, or Abaddon.
The destroyer.
Right? And look, if you grew up in church, or honestly, even if you just play a lot of, heavy metal records or play fantasy RPG video games, you have a picture in your head right now.
When I say Apollyon, what do you see? You see a demon general. You see a 10-foot-tall monster with bat wings commanding a legion of nightmares, clawing his way out of hell to destroy the world.
That is the archetype. He is the hell general. The pop culture consensus is basically that you have God and the angels on one side, the shiny team, and then down in the basement, in the abyss, you have this rival king, Apollyon, who is hoarding his army, just waiting for the referee to look away so he can unleash total chaos.
He's the ultimate antagonist, the anti-hero's boss, the final boss before the final boss.
Precisely. But today, we are going to ruin that image. Or maybe it's more accurate to say the source material we're diving into today is going to dismantle it brick by painful brick.
We really are. We have a stack of research today, and it's all centered on this dense but frankly fascinating document titled The Apollyon Thesis, Destruction as Divine Judicial Function. And honestly, it flips the whole table over. The core argument here is that everything we think we know about this demon is factually, linguistically, and theologically wrong.
It challenges the fundamental assumption that Apollyon is a villain at all.
Which, to be fair, that sounds terrifyingly controversial on its face.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're trying to rehabilitate a monster. Apollyon. He's just misunderstood.
Right, like it's a PR campaign for the abyss.
Yeah.
But the thesis isn't that Apollyon is a misunderstood nice guy. It's that Apollyon isn't a guy in the way we think of guys. The source argues he's not a rebel. He's not a rival to God. He's not an autonomous monster. He is a personified function.
A function. That's the key word.
Right. It's a category shift. We need to stop asking who is Apollyon and start asking what is Apollyon. The source argues that this figure is essentially God's own cleanup crew, a necessary function of the cosmos that has been given a face, a scary face, for the sake of the story.
And that's the mission for this deep dive. Because if this thesis holds up, and we're going to look at the Hebrew, the Greek, the Old Testament parallels, and even some pretty heavy metaphysics, it doesn't just change how we read one scary chapter in Revelation.
No, it goes much deeper.
It changes the entire understanding of what evil is, what hell is, and how the story of the world actually truly ends.
It's a massive claim. It suggests that the idea of hell as a rival kingdom, a place where Satan rules forever, like a dark mirror of God's kingdom, is actually a logical impossibility.
That was the part that stopped me in my tracks when I was going through this. The idea that destruction itself, which is what Apollyon literally represents, is destined to be destroyed.
Exactly.
You can't have an eternal destroyer if the very concept of destruction is eventually thrown into the fire and erased from existence. It's a logical contradiction.
It is. So we aren't just talking about a scary angel today. We are talking about the mechanics of how evil is deleted from reality.
So let's get into the weeds. We have to start where the text starts, with the name, or rather, the names. Revelation 9.1 is so strangely specific about this bilingual introduction.
It is. It's one of those details most people just breeze past. They see it as just a translation note. The text says, his name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon.
It feels like a dictionary entry got inserted into the middle of a nightmare. Why does the author, John, feel the need to give us both languages? Is he just showing off?
Well, the source argues that the structure is the very first clue. It's a bilingual puzzle. The author is doing something incredibly deliberate, by contrasting the Hebrew meaning with the Greek usage. It's not just for the sake of, a multicultural audience in the first century. It's to build a bridge between an abstract concept and a specific character.
Okay, so let's walk across that bridge. Let's look at the Hebrew side first. Abaddon.
Right. So the source breaks this down to its root word, which is avad.
Avad.
Avad. It's a verb. It means to perish, to be ruined, or to become lost. It has the sense of something wandering off and dissolving into nothing. Entropy, basically.
Okay.
Now, here is the critical piece of context the source highlights, and this is something most modern readers, especially in the West, completely miss. In the Old Testament, we're talking Job, Proverbs, the Psalms. The word Abaddon appears quite a few times, but it is almost never a person.
Wait, really? I always just assumed Abaddon was a proper noun, like a name.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Abaddon from the Abyss. Nice to meet you.
No, not at all. In the Hebrew scripture, Abaddon is a place. Or even more accurately, it's a state of being. It's almost always paired poetically with Sheol.
Sheol, which is the grave.
Right. Sheol is the Hebrew word for the grave or the realm of the dead. So you get these poetic couplets, these parallel lines, like in Proverbs 15.11, Sheol and Abaddon lie open before the Lord. Or in Job 26.6, Sheol is naked before God and Abaddon has no covering.
It's like saying the grave and the ruin, or the pit and the perishing.
Exactly, or the realm of the dead and the place of destruction. It's a location or a condition. It's abstract. It is not a guy named Abaddon walking around shaking hands or twirling a mustache. It represents the concept of total ruin, or the cosmic entropy that takes things apart. It's the junkyard of existence.
Okay, so in the Hebrew mind, which is the entire background for the author of Revelation, Abaddon is the where or the what of destruction. But then John switches to Greek, and in Greek, he is called Apollyon.
And this is where the magic trick happens. This is the literary pivot. The source explains that the Greek term Apollyon is what's called a participle. It's an active noun. It takes that abstract concept of destruction and turns it into an active agent, the destroyer.
So the author of Revelation is deliberately taking a what, the place of ruin, and turning it into a who, the agent of ruin. He's giving the junkyard a manager.
Precisely. The source calls this apocalyptic personification.
Apocalyptic personification. That sounds like a great heavy metal band name, by the way. But unpack that for us. What does that mean from a literary standpoint?
Well, think about how we use symbols in our own culture all the time. Think about Lady Justice. You walk into a courthouse, and there's a statue of a woman. She's wearing a blindfold. She's holding a sword and scales.
Right.
Now, if I asked you, who is that woman? What's her phone number? Does she have kids? Why, you'd look at me like I'm crazy.
Of course, because she's not a specific biological woman. She is a symbol. She represents the concept of fairness and law. We give the concept a human body so our minds can relate to it.
Or think of Father Time with the long beard and the scythe at New Year's. Or the Grim Reaper. These aren't people with Social Security numbers. They are concepts given a face. That is exactly what the source argues is happening in Revelation 9. The text isn't introducing a new character, like a new villain walking onto the stage with a complicated backstory and a grudge against his dad.
It's not a character reveal.
No. It is taking the ancient Hebrew concept of Abaddon, total ruin, and giving it a face. It's saying, here is the function of destruction, and for the purposes of this vision, it's acting like a king.
Which has massive implications. Because if that's true, we aren't dealing with a fallen angel who has free will, emotional baggage, and a personal plan to overthrow heaven. We are dealing with a function.
A function given a face. And that distinction is crucial because a function doesn't have free will to rebel. A function does what it is designed to do. Gravity doesn't decide to stop working on Tuesdays because it's angry at physics. It just pulls. In this case, the design is judgment. Apollyon is the personification of the gravity of consequences.
That reframes the fear entirely. Because if he's a function, he's predictable. He's running a program. But that leads us directly into the territory where this so-called figure operates. Because if Apollyon isn't a rebel demon, then where he lives, the abyss, can't be what we think it is either.
This was, I think, the most surprising part of the research for me. It really challenges a deeply ingrained cultural image. We are so conditioned by cartoons, by Dante's Inferno, by medieval paintings, to think of the abyss as Satan's basement.
Right. The fiery pit where the devil's in charge and throws the parties.
You know, the place where God is locked out, the one part of the map that says, here be dragons, and even God won't go there. But the source explicitly states, the abyss is not Satan's headquarters. It is God's depth domain.
Depth domain. I love that phrasing. It sounds like something out of science fiction, but you're saying it's deeply biblical.
It is. The source points us directly to the Psalms to back this up, specifically Psalm 36, verse 6. The text says, "Your righteousness is like the highest mountains. Your judgments are like the great deep."
Your judgments are like the great deep.
And the linguistic connection there is just rock solid. The Hebrew phrase for great deep is tehom rabbah. Now, when the Old Testament was translated into Greek a few centuries before Christ, in a version called the Septuagint, which the New Testament authors all used, they translated tehom as abyssos, the abyss.
So the Bible literally equates God's judgment with the abyss. It's not a leap, it's a direct translation.
Exactly. So when we see the abyss in Revelation, our first thought shouldn't be evil pit of sin. Our first thought should be the unfathomable depth of God's judgment. It is the storage facility for divine consequences. It is the place where God keeps the things that are too heavy, too volatile for the surface world.
The source also brings up this incredible imagery of thick darkness, because I think that's where people get hung up. They hear abyss, they hear pit, they think dark, and they automatically think evil. They say, well, God is light, so the abyss must be anti-God.
And that's a very Western, post-Enlightenment way of thinking. Light is good, dark is bad. Simple. But in the ancient Near East and all through the Bible, darkness isn't always evil. It often represents mystery, holiness, the unapproachable. In Exodus, where does God dwell? Where does he meet Moses?
On Mount Sinai, in the thick darkness.
Right. Moses has to leave the sunlight and the people behind and walk into the terrifying, thick darkness to meet with God. The source argues that the abyss is dark and scary, not because it's full of sin, but because it is full of mystery. It's the thick darkness of God's holiness and his unsearchable judgments. It's the heavy machinery room of the cosmos. It's dangerous, yes, absolutely, but it's not godless.
So it's not that God is absent from the abyss, it's that he's almost too present in a way that's overwhelming to our senses.
That's a great way to put it. It's the crushing weight of his absolute reality. The source quotes Psalm 139, verse 8, which is just a devastating verse for the independent hell theory. The psalmist says, "If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there."
If I make my bed in hell, you are there. You can't get away.
There is no Satan's room. There is no place in the cosmos where you can put up a keep-out sign to God. Even the deepest pit, the abyss itself, is sustained by his power. If God stopped thinking about the abyss for 1 second, it would simply cease to exist.
That really dismantles the idea of a dualistic universe, doesn't it? This picture of, like, a good kingdom and an evil kingdom fighting a cosmic Cold War.
It completely rejects it.
There's just God's kingdom, and then there's the basement, where he keeps the hazardous materials from the project of creation.
And those materials are under strict supervision and lockdown. Which brings us to the next major point in the thesis, governance. How is this destroyer controlled? Because if he was a true rebel, he'd be kicking down the door and not waiting for a key.
This is section 3 in our outline, the leash and the key. And honestly, this is where the rebel demon theory really starts to fall apart for me, just on a pure plot level. The logic doesn't hold up.
It really comes down to reading the text carefully. Revelation 9.1. I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth, and he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit.
Was given. That passive voice is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
It's the most important grammatical detail in the whole chapter. The abyss doesn't just burst open because the demons finally got strong enough to pick the lock. It is unlocked, and the key is given.
And the source makes a simple, but I think a really profound argument here. You don't give a key to a rebel.
You certainly don't. Think about a prison riot. If a prisoner gets the key to his own cell, that's a prison break. That's chaos. That's a failure of the system. But if the warden hands a key to a guard and says, "Open cell block D," that's an authorized operation.
A controlled release.
Exactly. The
Without-
key comes from heaven. This implies authorization, permission, and a clear chain of command. God is the one handing over the key.
So the abyss is a locked armory, essentially. And the star, this angel, is the one authorized to open it. But then things come out. And this is where the horror movie starts. The locusts.
The locusts. And I mean, this is the stuff of nightmares. John's description is intentionally terrifying. He describes them with hair like women, teeth like lions, tails with stingers like scorpions, wearing armor like iron. The sound of their wings is like the deafening sound of 1,000 chariots rushing into battle.
It's totally visceral. And looking at that description, it's so easy to say, okay, surely these are demons. Look at them. They're monsters. Angels don't look like H.R. Geiger paintings.
That's the surface reading, and it's an understandable one. But the source urges us to look past the appearance, which is apocalyptic symbolism, and look at the behavior. It calls this the behavioral analysis of the text. Because if these were chaotic, rebellious demons who hate God and hate creation, what would they do the moment they got free?
They'd bring it all down, total scorched earth, eat the crops, poison the water, kill every human being they could possibly find. Just pure, unadulterated chaos.
Exactly. Rebels don't follow rules. That's what makes them rebels. But look at the text. These monstrous locusts are operating under 3 strict constraints. Constraint number 1, don't touch the grass.
Which is the weirdest thing for locusts, right? That's literally all locusts do. They eat green things. That's their entire purpose in life.
It's completely contrary to their nature. It's like telling fire not to burn. It's an override command. The text says they were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree. That shows they are obeying an ecological rule that protects the earth itself. A rebel demon wouldn't care about the ecosystem.
Okay, that's a good point. So constraint number 2, don't kill.
They are allowed to torment, but not to kill. That is a massive restraint on their power. If this was a war waged by Satan to destroy God's precious creation, humanity, why stop at torment? Why not just wipe everyone out? The fact that they stop short of killing proves they are operating under a divine limit. They are on a leash, and the leash is short.
And then there's the big one, the one that, for me, just seals the deal. Constraint number 3, the target.
Yes, this is the smoking gun. They can only hurt those without the seal of God on their foreheads.
This is the clincher for me. If Apollyon is the devil, or a high-ranking demon general, why in the world would he and his army avoid hurting God's people? Wouldn't God's people be his number 1 target?
Precisely. If you are a rebel general, you attack the enemy's troops. You go after their most valuable assets, you don't carefully avoid them, and only attack the people who are already ignoring your enemy. The targeting makes absolutely no sense if Apollyon is evil. It only makes sense if Apollyon is an agent of judgment.
The source uses a great analogy here that really helped me visualize it. The police dog.
It's a very helpful image. Imagine a canine unit. A big German shepherd. It's barking, it's snarling, it's got massive teeth. It looks terrifying. If you are a criminal running from the law, that dog looks like a monster. It looks like pure, unrestrained aggression.
But the dog isn't wild. It's not a wolf.
No. It waits for a command from its handler. It only attacks the specific target pointed out by the handler. And this is the crucial part. It stops when it's told to heel. It is violence, yes, but it is sanctioned, controlled violence used to enforce the law.
So the locusts are scary, but they are state agents. They are God's canine unit, unleashed on a specific group for a specific purpose.
Correct. They are agents of the divine state. And this isn't some new, strange concept invented by the book of Revelation. The source connects this directly back to the Exodus. This is a pattern God has used before.
The Passover.
Passover. We often forget the character in Exodus chapter 12 called the Destroyer. In Hebrew, it's Hamashit.
Yeah, we usually just say the angel of death, and we picture a skeleton in a black robe, the Grim Reaper again.
Right. But look at the mechanics in the Exodus story. It is identical to Revelation 9. God tells the Israelites to put the blood of a lamb on the doorpost. That's the seal.
The mark of protection.
Exactly. When the destroyer comes through Egypt that night, he doesn't just kill randomly. He checks the doorpost. He's looking for the seal.
He discriminates.
He discriminates based on the mark. If the mark is there, he passes over. If the mark is absent, judgment falls on that house. The source concludes that Apollyon is simply the Revelation version of the Passover destroyer. He's a frightening, lethal, but completely obedient agent of God's covenant protection and judgment.
That completely reframes the fear factor. If you have the seal, if you're on God's side, Apollyon isn't coming for you.
Right.
He's actually enforcing the protection of your seal. He's the bouncer keeping the unsealed troublemakers away from you.
He's a marshal enforcing the boundary. He's terrifying to the lawbreaker, but he's actually part of the system that vindicates and protects the righteous.
Okay, so we've established the who, a personified function, and the what, God's controlled judgment. But now we need to get into the why. And this is where the source takes a deep dive into metaphysics. And I want to warn our listeners, this gets a little philosophical, a little heady, but it is the engine that drives the entire theory.
This is section 4, the metaphysics of evil. And it all hinges on a single concept.
And it centers on a Latin phrase that sounds like a spell from Harry Potter, provatio boni.
Provatio boni. It translates to the privation of good. This is a classic theological concept. You can trace it all the way back to St. Augustine. It essentially answers the question, what is evil made of? What is its atomic weight? What substance is it?
And the answer is, It doesn't have one. It's made of nothing.
Essentially, yes. Evil is not a substance. It's not like a rock or a gas or a chemical element. It doesn't have independent existence. It's not a thing in itself.
Help us visualize that, because that's hard to wrap your head around. I mean, evil feels very real. A wound feels real. A lie feels real.
Okay, let's use an analogy. Think about darkness. Does darkness exist as a thing? Can you go to the store and buy a bucket of darkness? Can you shine a flash dark to project a beam of shadow onto a wall?
No, of course not. Darkness is just what happens when you take away the light. It's an absence.
Exactly. Or think about cold. Physics tells us there is no such thing as cold energy or cold particles. Cold is just the absence of heat. Evil is the same. It is the absence of good. It is the distortion of good. It is parasitic.
Parasitic? How so?
It needs a good thing to corrupt. You can't have rot without a piece of fruit to rot. You can't have a wound without a healthy body to wound. You can't have a lie without a concept of truth to twist. Evil is always a parasite on a good host. It has no life of its own.
So evil is a lack, a hole in reality, a shadow.
Right. And here is where the source applies this to the idea of an eternal demon king. If God is defined as infinite being, total reality, total truth, total light, and evil is non-being, or Allah, survive the full, unveiled presence of God.
It's like trying to keep a shadow alive at high noon when the sun is directly overhead.
That is the perfect analogy. When the sun is directly overhead, the shadow completely disappears. It has nowhere to go. The source puts it in an almost mathematical formula. Privation plus infinite presence, collapse of privation.
Whoa. So the argument is that it is metaphysically impossible for a rebel to say no to God forever once the lights are fully turned on at the end of time.
Yes, because the rebellion itself is based on a lie. The lie that I can exist apart from God. The lie that I am my own source of life and meaning. Once God is fully revealed as the source and sustainer of all existence, that lie evaporates. It's not just that God defeats the rebel in some kind of cosmic sword fight, it's that the rebellion itself loses its ontological ground. It collapses because it was never truly real in the first place.
This connects to another fascinating analogy in the source, the distinction between a role and a person. It uses the example of prisoner 79283.
This is such a crucial distinction for understanding this. Prisoner is a role. It's a legal status relative to the law. It's not a biological substance. You aren't born a convict. You become one because of an action.
It's a label, a temporary one.
A temporary one. And crucially, if you serve your sentence, or if the law is changed, or if you are pardoned, the role disappears. The label is removed.
You don't stop existing as a person. You just stop being prisoner 79283.
Exactly. The role is deleted, but the entity remains now restored to their proper status as citizen. The source applies this directly to these titles we see in the Bible. The accuser, which is what Satan means. The destroyer, Apollyon. These are functional predicates. They are jobs.
So Apollyon isn't a species of monster. Apollyon is a job description, a cosmic title.
He is the destroyer only as long as there is something that needs destroying. He is the cleanup crew only as long as there is trash. Once the judgment is complete, once the cosmic restoration is finished, the function is no longer needed.
And if the function isn't needed, the role is deleted. The job title is retired.
Exactly. Which brings us to the end of the movie, eschatology, the study of the end times. And this is where that aha moment we teased at the beginning finally lands with its full weight.
Section 5.
Yeah.
The lake of fire.
Now again, pop culture and a lot of theology, to be fair, has us thinking of this as God's eternal torture chamber, a place where the bad guys swim in lava forever while God watches satisfied. But the source pushes back hard on that interpretation. It argues that the lake of fire isn't a preservation chamber for sin, it's a consuming fire. And biblically, consuming fire is a description of God himself. Hebrews 12.29. For our God is a consuming fire.
So the lake of fire isn't a place away from God. It is God. It's the experience of his unfiltered presence.
It is the raw, undiluted holiness of God. It is the river of fire that flows from his throne in the vision of Daniel 7. And what does fire do? It doesn't preserve things. It transforms them. It burns up impurities. It consumes what is flammable. It purifies gold by burning away the dross, but it completely burns up the chaff.
And the source points to a specific verse that creates this massive logic puzzle for the eternal hell crowd. It's Revelation 20, verse 14.
Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire.
Just pause on that for a second. Death and Hades are thrown in.
This is the crucial point. This is the linchpin of the whole argument. How do you burn death? Death isn't a person with a body. Hades isn't a guy. They are concepts. They are domains. They are states of being.
You can't torture a concept. You can't put death on a rack and whip it.
No, you abolish it. You eradicate it. When the text says death is thrown into the fire, it means death shall be no more. It is the total eradication of the concept of mortality itself.
And if death is destroyed?
Then the angel of death, Apollyon, the destroyer, is out of a job. He is consumed along with the very domain he rules and the function he performs.
This is the aha moment. You can't have an eternal king Apollyon if his kingdom Abaddon, the place of destruction, has been completely incinerated.
Precisely. If the realm of ruin is ruined, the ruler of ruin ceases to exist as a ruler. The source argues this refutes the idea of eternal hell by its own internal logic, because you can't have an eternal dualism where God rules upstairs and Apollyon rules downstairs if the downstairs has been thrown into the fire and erased from the map.
The Sort calls this the totality argument, and it references a couple of key verses like 1 Corinthians 15.28, that God may be all in all.
All in all, not God in some people and Satan in others, God all in all. The source argues that if there is a pocket of reality, a hell, a dungeon, where God is rejected forever, then God is not all in all. He would be all in some, which diminishes his ultimate victory.
So the end state of the Bible isn't a stalemate. It's not a Cold War that just lasts for eternity. It is total victory, total reclamation.
Total reconciliation. Colossians 1 says that through Christ, God was pleased to reconcile all things to himself, whether things on earth or things in heaven. The source takes that all things very, very literally. It means the map is completely reclaimed, no dark corners left.
It's incredibly hopeful. It's a beautiful picture, but it also raises a massive practical question because the Bible does talk about torment. It talks about weeping and gnashing of teeth. If God is just going to fix everything in the end, does what we do now matter? Why not just live however we want and wait for the big cosmic fire to clean us up?
That is the inevitable and correct question to ask. And the source addresses this in its final section, section 6, the tale of two deaths. This is the application part, because even if the fire is God's holiness, and even if the ultimate goal is restoration, the experience of that fire seems to be very, very different for different people.
Right. It's not that everyone gets a free pass. It's that everyone goes through the fire one way or another.
Exactly. The source introduces this powerful distinction between a willing death and an unwilling death.
Okay. Break that down for us.
Remember, everyone encounters the fire. Everyone encounters the raw presence of God eventually. The question is, what is the condition of your heart when you meet him? What are you bringing to that encounter?
Okay.
The source points to a verse like Galatians 2.20. The Apostle Paul says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me.
That's the willing death.
Exactly. The believer, the one with the seal of God, has already died. They have voluntarily let their ego, their sin, their selfishness, their false self, die with Christ on the cross. They've let the fire of God's Spirit burn away the false self right now in this life. They have willingly surrendered the need to be their own God.
So when they meet the ultimate consuming fire later,
Yeah,
at the end of time,
they are fireproof because the fuel is already gone. They have nothing left to burn. They are already aligned with the nature of God. So the fire feels like love. It feels like warmth. It feels like home. It's a homecoming.
and the destroyer Apollyon passes over them, the locusts can't touch them.
Because there is nothing in them for him to destroy. The job of purification is already done. They've consented to it.
But then there's the unwilling death.
This is the state of the unsealed. These are the people who cling to the false self. They cling to their rebellion, their ego, their right to run their own universe. They refuse to let go.
So when they meet the fire,
It feels like torment. It feels like hell. Not because God is actively trying to hurt them like some kind of cosmic torturer, but because they are fighting reality itself. They are trying to hold on to a shadow in the middle of a supernova. The burning they feel is the painful stripping away of the lies they've built their identity on.
C.S. Lewis famously said, "The doors of hell are locked from the inside."
That's the exact idea. The torment is the resistance. The pain comes from the friction of resisting the love and reality of God.
That's such a powerful image. It shifts the agency, in a way. God isn't turning up the heat to hurt them. He's just being God. He's just being light and truth.
Exactly. The source argues that this explains the torment of the locusts in Revelation. And remember that strange time limit?
5 months.
The locusts in Revelation 9 are only allowed to torment for 5 months. Why a time limit? If this was about eternal, retributive punishment, why not forever?
If it was pure revenge, you'd think it would be eternal. No parole.
Right. The time limit suggests purpose. It suggests that the torment is purgative, it's corrective, it's aimed at breaking the delusion. It's a temporary, severe shock to the system to wake the person up to the reality of their condition. It's not punishment for the sake of punishment. It's a severe mercy aimed at bringing about the end of the rebellion.
So the argument is that eventually, even the unwilling will have their resistance burned away, that the fire does its job completely.
The source implies that the phrase God all in all means exactly that. Resistance cannot be eternal because evil, as a privation, has no substance to sustain it. Eventually, the lie collapses under the weight of truth. Eventually, every knee bows. Not because they are forced to by a tyrant, but because they finally see that their rebellion was from the beginning absurd.
That brings us full circle. We started with Apollyon as this terrifying demon general, the ultimate rival to God, and we've ended up with Apollyon as a temporary tool, a marshal of judgment.
A marshal who works for the judge. And once the case is closed and the sentence of restoration is complete, the marshal retires. His job is done.
Let's summarize the thesis for our listeners before we wrap up, because this is a lot to take in, and it really does challenge the standard narrative that many of us grew up with.
It definitely does. So if we boil it all down, the core takeaways from the Apollyon thesis are, first, Apollyon is a personification of the concept of destruction, not an autonomous demon. The name change from the Hebrew Abaddon to the Greek Apollyon signals a literary operation making a what into a who for the story.
Second, the abyss isn't Satan's kingdom. It's God's depth domain, the place of his unfathomable judgments, and he has the only key.
Third, the behavior of the locusts, the restraint, the ecological rules, the precise targeting of only the unsealed proves they're agents of divine judgment, operating under a key given from heaven. They're on a leash.
Fourth, and this is the deep one, evil is privatio boni, a lack of good. It cannot exist eternally in the full presence of God. Therefore, an eternal rebel kingdom is metaphysically impossible.
And finally, fifth, the ultimate fate of Apollyon is to be abolished. When death and Hades are thrown into the lake of fire, the function of the destroyer is consumed and his role is deleted from the cosmos.
And the practical application for us right now is to die the willing death, to let go of the ego, to consent to God's purifying work in our lives and be sealed so that when the fire comes, it finds nothing left to burn.
That's the gospel application right there. It turns a scary monster story into a story of ultimate hope and total restoration.
You know, we always try to leave the listeners with a final provocative thought, something that isn't explicitly in the source material but naturally flows from it, something to chew on.
I've been thinking about this throughout our deep dive.
Lay it on us.
If the source is right, and if Apollyon, the personification of destruction, is eventually thrown into the fire and erased, and if death is no more, does that mean that judgment itself is a temporary concept?
Whoa, say more about that.
Well, we tend to think of God as the judge. That's one of his core titles. But a judge is only necessary when there's a crime. A courtroom is only necessary when there's a conflict to resolve. A destroyer is only necessary when there is something that needs to be destroyed.
So if crime and evil and conflict are fully and finally eradicated,
then God takes off the judge's robe. He takes off the mask of the consuming fire. The need for that function is over. And what is left when that temporary role is no longer needed?
Father, Creator.
Creator, Father, love. Perhaps the ultimate eternal nature of God is not judge. Perhaps judge is just the emergency role he steps into to deal with the problem of evil. And once Apollyon has finished the cleanup job and the problem is gone for good, that role disappears forever, leaving only God all in all.
That is a beautiful thought. The idea that all the scary parts of the Bible are just the construction noise of a grand renovation project. And once the house is finished, the noise stops.
And we just get to live in the house forever.
I love that. Well, that is the Apollyon thesis. It's definitely a different way to read Revelation, and frankly, a much more coherent one.
It takes the fear out of the monster and puts you all back onto the mystery and sovereignty of God.
And that is what we're all about here. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.